Hello，大家好，我是 CJ。今天我们继续上次未听完的内容。上期作者讲到了他使用 VM 的一个主要原因是为了提高效率，而不需要再去使用鼠标了。今天我们继续。
Computers now, if you type VI, that's going to be alias to Vim anyway. By default, there's not really a good reason for you to use VI that I can think of. The reason I first started using Vim is kind of a silly one, and that is because my brother used it. My brother, Nick, he climbs mountains for a living right now. He lives in Seattle and goes up and down Rainier. When it gets too cold to climb Rainier, he goes to the other side of the world and climbs up mountains over there, and then comes back again and starts climbing Rainier over and over and over again. Before he did that, though, he used to do quite a bit of programming. And I remember when I would watch him program, because he started programming before me, he looked like a real hacker. He looked like the hackers you see on TV. He never touched the mouse. There was text flying out all over the screen, files opening, closing, splits. It was awesome. It was like I wanted to be that person, you know? And he was using Vim. I didn't know it was Vim, but that's what he was using. So I opened Vim. I tried to edit some files. I was using Eclipse at the time and doing Java.
这两节中，作者讲到他首次使用 VM 的原因是有一点傻的，因为他的哥哥 Nick 他是长期从事编程相关的工作，他也记得他的哥哥是真正像一个我们电视里常见的黑客那样使用 VM 进行编程，而他从不使用鼠标，所以他的文字也是在屏幕中乱飞，看起来是非常酷的。所以呢，他就想尝试使用一下 VM， 但那个时候作者还在使用 Eclipse 来编写 Java。
Java. This is like my first year of college. I was taking an introductory to programming class. It's the first programming I've ever done, and I thought Eclipse was great. It compiled my code for me. It had buttons for everything, but I didn't feel like a real hacker. When I looked at Nick, I mean, granted, he was writing C, which already looks way cooler. He was using Vim as well, and it just impressed me. So I tried to start opening up some of my Java files, and I have no idea how to do it. No idea how to edit a file. I have no idea how to save a file. I have no idea how to type in the document, for crying out loud. If I press keys, it does nothing. Sometimes it deletes words. Sometimes it pastes words. It's a mess. And this is probably the first experience that everybody has when they start using Vim, because Vim operates completely different than any other text editor I've ever used. It's weird. Vim has modes. It has a language. It has objects, subjects, counts, verbs. All that stuff is like really weird when you first get started. But once you understand it, it's a lot of learning up front. Everything just kind of clicks, and you're instantly faster than you've ever been before.
这里作者讲到，他刚开始使用 Eclipse 的时候，其实 Eclipse 的功能也非常强大，可以帮他编译代码，有许多可视化的按钮来帮他完成编程相关的事情。但是他觉得这并不像是一个真正的黑客那样，比如说他像他哥哥那样可以使用 C， 看起来是非常酷的。所以他尝试使用 VM 来编辑他的 Java 文件，但是他并不知道他们的 idea how to do it， 而且他也不知道如何编辑一个文件，如何保存文件，甚至删除修改那些就更别提了。这个应该也是大部分新手使用 VM 的时候所碰到的一些问题，它和我们所碰到的一些其他的 different than any other text editor 都和我们其他的一些编辑器完全不一样，所以刚开始使用的时候会感觉比较奇怪，但是一旦你已经掌握了它，那么你的使用的效率将会飞速提高。
For example, let's say we wanted to copy a method from one Ruby file and put it in another. If I was using Sublime Text, right, I would take my mouse, I would select that method, I'd press Command C to copy it, and then I'd click over to where I want the method to be, and I'd press Command V to paste it. Not very bad. That's pretty fast. Probably doesn't take very long. But in Vim, you can do it even faster and without touching your mouse. Vim has a verb for yanking text. It's not called copying, it's called yanking. It has a movement called inside. So you can yank inside something. And then it has subjects called text blocks, which in Ruby, those are methods. Vim understands blocks of text. If you're editing a markdown document, like say a README, Vim will know where a paragraph starts and where a paragraph ends. If you're editing a Ruby file, it's going to know where a method begins and where a method ends, or where your class begins or where your class ends. So using the verb yank, which happens to be the key why.
这里他举了一个例子，就如果说我们想要使用编辑器来复制一个我们的方法，我们 Ruby 中的一个方法，我们需要首先使用鼠标来选中我们想要复制的这个方法，然后用 Command-C 再加 Command-V。但如果说我们使用的是 VM 的话， VM 它可以理解整个 block 块，整个比如说我们的段落的开始和段落的结尾，它可以自动帮我们选中。如果说我们是一个 Ruby 的一个函数一个方法的话，它也会自动去选中这个方法的开始和这个方法的结尾。好，我们继续。
Y, and then the movement inside, which happens to be the key I, and then the subject paragraph, which is Vim's word for a block of text. You can yank a method. So if I put my cursor inside a Ruby method and I type YIP for yank inside paragraph, it's going to copy that method to the clipboard. So by understanding the verb yank, the movement inside, and the subject paragraph, we can perform actions really, really quickly. And then if we want to paste it somewhere else, we press the P key for paste, and it'll stick that text down. So everything in Vim is based on those concepts of verbs, movements, and subjects. You also have one more thing you can play with, and that is counts. So if you want to perform something multiple times, in most cases, you can stick a number in front of it, like 1, 2, 3, 5, and it's going to do it that many times. Understanding those basic concepts gets you a really long way, and then it's just a matter of understanding which keys correspond to which verbs and which movements and which subjects.
这个自动选中段落或者说函数的这个特性呢，在 Vim 中被称为 yanking。只要我们的光标移动到我们想要复制的这个函数题里，它就会当我们输入 y， 它就会自动 yip， 其实它就会自动将我们的整个函数内部的方法给复制出来。所以其实我们只需要理解到它其中的一些基本的概念，我们就可以快速的提高其中的效率。好，我们继续。
And that just comes with time, which is the third reason I like to use Vim, is there's so much stuff to learn. Whenever I get bored, all I gotta do is pull up Vim help, and I can start learning stuff. And every little thing I learn, every little keyboard shortcut, every movement, every subject, gets me a little bit faster. And it doesn't seem like a lot, like the example I gave earlier of copying and pasting text in Sublime with a mouse. That doesn't take very long. But if you add up all those little bits, you're saving a ton of time. A good analogy I like to use is lifting weights. If I'm squatting 100 pounds and I take a little teeny tiny 2.5 pound plate and I put it on each side of the barbell, I probably won't even notice it. I mean, I'll be squatting 105 pounds now, right? That's not really that big of a difference. But if I add those 2.5 pound plates 60 more times, going in once a day and doing that, I'm now squatting 400 pounds, which is a pretty big difference. So those little changes don't seem like a lot.
这里作者讲到他的第三个喜欢 Vim 的一个原因是，使用 Vim 的话，他可以学到许多东西。每学一样东西呢，都可以让自己的效率提高一点。就像是我们 workout 训练深蹲的时候，刚开始可能只能蹲100磅，当我们慢慢的逐渐加5磅这样的轻量的加我们的重量，这样的话我们最终就会达到巨大的提升，其实就是一个积少成多的一个道理。OK， 我们继续。
But taken as a whole, you're editing text way faster than people who aren't using Vim. The last reason I like to use Vim is because it runs in the terminal. And this may not seem like a big deal, but it really is. Cosmetically, it's nice because you can just pop a terminal open full screen and have no Chrome. I use Mac OS, so I've got that big menu bar on top. It's really nice to just full screen a terminal and not see anything at all and have your command line tools and your text editor all running in the same window. I happen to use tmux to manage that stuff. I won't talk about tmux now, but I definitely will talk about it in another episode. But even out of the cosmetic reasons, it's nice to have a text editor that runs in the terminal because you're not always using your own machine, right? As web developers, I'm a web developer, we're always connecting to remote machines to edit files. Now, why is it that we should be forced to use a different text editor, right? The nice thing about Vim is it runs in the terminal. So every machine you connect to will likely already have Vim installed. But even if it doesn't, you can install it. And you can put your config files over there, and you can make it so that no matter where you're editing text, you're always in the same environment, which is awesome. Before I started using Vim, I would connect to remote machines and be forced to use some text editor I'm not familiar with. And it drove me nuts. But now, I sometimes forget I'm on a remote machine because it's exactly the same as the machine I use at home. So if you've never tried Vim, or maybe you tried it in the past and it was super confusing or really turned you off.
这里其实他讲到他最后一个使用 Vim 的一个原因是，它可以在终端中运行，不仅可以使用我们自己的设备，还可以连接到远程设备去编辑文件，甚至我们可以使用相同的 Vim 的配置，可以使得我们在任何环境下，我们的环境、我们的一些配置、一些快捷键，所有的东西都是相同的，所以这一点也是非常吸引他的一个原因。好，我们继续。
Give it a second shot. There's a great Stack Overflow article that just kind of rehashes a lot of the things I said here, but it's also just fun to read. It talks about the core concepts of VI, the editor that Vim is based on. And I put a link to that in the show notes. There's also Vimcasts by Drew Neal, which is a screencast series that's totally free. And he covers a lot of advanced concepts. He's got a little bit of beginner stuff in there as well. You can also just open up a terminal and type Vim Tutor, and Vim's going to give you a little lesson in how to use Vim. Give it a shot. That's all I've got for this week. You can find the show notes at healthyhacker.com/1. If you have any questions or feedback, send me a voicemail. healthyhacker.com/voicemail.
最后这一节他讲到，在 Stack Overflow 里面其实有很多文章来介绍一些基本的概念，我们也可以通过这些基本的学习一些高级，或者说学习一些高级的一些使用，可以让我们快速的去掌握 VM。网上呢也有许多相关的课程，期待大家可以在我们的终端里面输入 VM 去尝试一下。好，今天的分享就到这里，谢谢大家。